what you are saying is that we have to come back to the fundamentals, because there is a problem now around the world with what we have and what was shown in the VT is really to tell us we are facing a very deep crisis, and the capitalist system is in crisis. I'm not sure, in fact, that the capitalist system is in crisis. I think that it's
the financial system is in crisis.
We can talk about this, but I think it's its own logic. What you are saying, when it comes, for example, to what is done by Muslim economists and what is done by Islamic banks, my point on this is, and I have been very critical by saying we have deep problems. In fact, we are adapting ourselves to the system, so we are making halal transactions into an ocean of what we understand as haram. And you are calling it cosmetic. So what's wrong?
Can I give an example? I mean,
let me just finish with the question. What's wrong with what the Muslims are doing now when it comes to what we call Islamic finance?
Well, every Islamic bank has a Sharia board.
Yes.
And they will try as much as possible to make their products what they call Sharia compliant. But they will not make it Sharia based, because if it's Sharia based, you have to have gold and silver in the equation. At the recent Financial Times conference back in November the 5th, quite appropriately, the head of the Islamic finance department of the UBS, which is one of the biggest Swiss banks, quite openly said, look, let's face it, Islamic finance at the moment is just a veneer. It is based on a raft of financial instruments which are not Sharia compliant. And those in turn are based on another raft of financial instruments which are also not Sharia compliant. So in fact, he said in so many words, if we're really going to have Islamic finance, we actually have to change it. And the whole thrust of the conference was we have to go from Sharia compliant to Sharia based. And no one spoke about gold or silver, and I kept on asking questions and saying, why aren't we talking about the gold and the silver?
I want you to clarify this. When you speak about gold and silver, you are saying that gold and silver are in fact an obligation.
Absolutely, Without it, you don't have Islamic finance.
Why?
You have to put it in inverted commas.
But why? Is it the only way to have something which is stable?
Well, put it this way. This was the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. So if you're a Muslim,
this was the sunnah of the time. Can we do it now?
This was the sunnah of the Muslims, basically for 14 centuries.
Okay.
Up until about 1928. There's a very interesting book called King Edward VII and His Jewish Court by Robert Alfrey. Difficult to get nowadays, but you'll find it in the British Museum. And basically it looks at that period of transition when the big banks were saying to the Muslims, give us your gold and silver and we'll give you this new money. You know, it's paper money, it fits in your pocket more easily. And guess what? We can devalue it just whenever we want, and then you'll have to take out a loan and pay interest on it, and just when you think you've paid it off, we'll devalue it more, and you'll have to take out another loan, and before you know what, you'll have a huge big national debt which you're never going to pay off, just like England. And if I could just give you an example of England, look at the national debt of England. This was created by King William of Orange, about, 17th century, 18th century, £1 million. It was structured in such a way that it would never be repaid. In fact, it's been repaid countless times, but it's still being repaid. It's now swollen. So when Labour came into power, the national debt was about £350 billion. In 12 years, it's doubled. It's now, 2010, about £900 billion. They're saying in another 4 years, it's going to double again. The interest on that debt for this year is going to be about £30 billion. And when you look at what happened with this crisis last year, what actually happened? You know, this thing about bailing out the banks, it wasn't bailing out the banks at all. It's strengthening their position and their hold, because where do they borrow the money from to bail out the banks? They borrow it from the banks to help the banks. And then they have to pay interest on that. And so the banks win out. They're almost winning as much as they do in times of war, because in times of war the banks make a killing. They literally, but you know, they finance the killing on both sides. They finance both sides of the war. Both sides have to borrow money,
and at the same time they are making money
to make the arms, etc., and pay the soldiers. And then at the end there's all the reconstruction, and then there's the reparations. So the banks love war because that's their big money earner.
And this is also what we can just witness right now. Let me, because we don't have much time, and it's a very complex issue. The point here is really for us to say that what is done now could be cosmetic. There is a deep problem here. Very often what we are presenting at the Islamic alternative is something which is adaptation to the system, not going to the fundamentals, not going to the roots of the problem, and this is what we are saying. And I kept on saying this myself, having lots of criticism coming from the people saying, no, we have, and then we have a market and the people are coming and say, they are coming because they know that in this market there is money, so they want the money much more than the principles. So if now, and we have a few minutes left, so what could be the first steps that we can present as an alternative?
The first step is traverse the process that was really started in the 19th century. And I'll give you a practical example. Nathan Rothschild, who, as we know, made his money after the Battle of Waterloo, because he came back and he had the knowledge before anyone else of the outcome. He needed some gold bullion. He went to the Bank of England. He said, I need £1 million worth of gold bullion. I'll redeem it at such and such a date. They said, fine. They knew his word was good. When the date came, he came back and he gave them paper money worth £1 million. And they said, but you were going to return gold bullion. And he said, well, if you want, I'll go to your bank teller and I'll give them these notes, and it's got a promise to pay the bearer on demand. They will give me gold bullion out of your vaults, and I can pay you in gold bullion. So it was a magical trick.
Gold is this realistic?
Now we have to do it the other way around. We actually have to start bringing gold back into the equation. So, for example, you can go to ecoal.com, you can go to edinar.com if you want an Islamic solution. You can buy e-dinars, but each electronical dinar is backed by a physical dinar. So if you want, at any moment, you can change your e-dinars into real dinars like this.
But is it possible to do that at the global level?
It's being adopted in Malaysia, it's being adopted in Indonesia. IMF are trying to stop it. And it's actually a condition of IMF membership. You can't be a member unless you promise not to bring gold and silver back into the equation. So it's actually a whole control mechanism.
So it could be the first step.
Debt is a control mechanism.
So it's to spread around this kind of transactions. This is what you think that
you have to start. You can't just go from gold to paper like that. You have to have them in parallel. Paper money still has small change still has a place as flus, as small change. But for example, when you come into the Islamic dimension, the zakat on wealth cannot be paid in paper money or electronic money or debased money.
Some scholars are saying yes.
Yeah, because they say darura, but if you want actually a sound financial system, you actually have to pay zakat in gold and silver. So if you really want to honor the deen, if you want a sound economy, do that. And look at the economy in the past. Look at all the great civilizations. At the basis of their economy, they had gold and silver, very little taxation, because at the moment, taxes go up and up and up. Why? Because they have to service the national debt. So what is the answer? Follow the sunnah of the Rasul and his last khutbah, and his final hajj. He said, riba is made haram, write it off. Whatever has been created out of nothing, write it off, pay back the capital. And if all the modern economies today did that, just write off all the money that's been created out of nothing. It doesn't really exist anyway, so it's quite easy to write off. Pay back the capital, bring back gold and silver, then you have a sound economy.
Okay, so this will be the last word. I think it was very interesting to have this discussion, because the point is that if we come back to the Islamic teachings, that's quite clear that we can find in the Quran and the prophetic traditions very, very numerous teachings and principles that we can bring for our time. It's not only practices, but it's also we can draw from these practices a theory. And something that you said, which is quite important, is coming back, for example, to gold and silver as the main reference, and this should be the starting point. And then to also be critical, because you are very critical about what is done now, the cosmetic Islamization of finance and economy today is something that could and should be discussed. Why? Because Muslim scholars are coming with answers when they come with, and they listen to economists saying these are the transactions and these are the means that we have. We are not very often touching and addressing the roots of the whole system. Is this right? Is this the right way? So a critical discussion among Muslim scholars, economists, and people who are specialized in this area. And there are steps to be done. So you are talking about what is done now in Malaysia, what is done in some other countries, people trying to come back to the roots, come back to some of the practices. This is all open to debate. It seems that Islam and Muslims have something to give. They can come with alternative solutions, but the point is not only by adapting, but questioning the whole system and the fundamentals and the principles